setting up your meeting. Well, I think we are live. So, hello everyone watching at home. Welcome to the Art and Brexit talk at Centrala. I think this is our 5th one. And today we're going to be chatting about touring and how musicians are going to be affected by the new restrictions with Brexit coming in, what issues they're going to face, all of that good stuff. I'm thrilled to be joined by 3 very exciting guests. We've got Katrina Weinhardt from the European Music Council. We've got Phil Meadows from Musicians Movement, and we've got Stephen Brown from the Musicians Union. Thanks for being here, guys. Really appreciate it. I'm Rohit Chapagnanam as well. I always forget to introduce myself on these things. So let's just go around and introduce everyone. Let's go around my screen. So Katrina, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, hello everyone, and thanks very much for the invitation. I'm here for the European Music Council. We are a European network organization with over 70 member organizations all over Europe. And because of this discussion, it's the geographic Europe, so it's not just members in the EU. Our members are national music councils, European organizations specified in certain fields of music, Composer and Songwriter Alliance, Live TMA for the music venues, things like that. And then also organizations which we call national specialized organizations that, for example, also includes the Scottish Music Centre, Live Music Now Scotland. And our main fields of work is advocacy work. Of course, EU is a big part of that, but also networking within the music sector through conferences that we organize, workshops. We have a fellowship program, and things like that. And then we also are involved in other projects. We currently coordinate an Erasmus Plus project, but we also partner in another Creative Europe project. And overall, we receive for our work as EMCS network funding also from the EU through the Creative Europe program.
Well, thank you very much. Phil, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Rohit. So my name's Phil Meadows. I am a performing musician. I play the saxophone, and I run a charity called the Engines Orchestra that does lots of collaborative projects. But I'm also very much on the industry side of things as well as performing. Pre-COVID, I think I was doing about 150 performances a year across Europe. Post-COVID, I think I've done about 3 in the past 12 months. And I founded a thing called the Musicians Movement, which is here to lobby for positive change surrounding the music sector in the UK, and in particular supporting freelance performers who have felt very underrepresented by the UK government so far throughout all of this, and have felt somewhat of an afterthought at times. So we're trying our best. We've got a forum with about 17,000 people, and we're trying our best to cultivate some change and working with different organisations across the UK.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Phil. Stephen?
Thank you, Rohit. My name's Stephen Brown. I'm the regional organiser for the Musicians Union in the Midlands. That covers East and West Midlands. So my job is managing our team in our office and overall responsibility for our collective bargaining with the numerous agreements that we have on my patch for orchestras and theatres, stuff like that. Also responsible for our legal and contract services that we offer. The MU itself has got 32,000 members nationally, and on my patch there are 3,000 members. Probably around 45% of those members will have done gigs in the European Union to supplement their earnings or part of their earnings. I mean, the kind of majority of our members on my patch earn significantly less than the kind of national wage, if you like, of £28,000. Most of them, the majority, about 20 grand. And if 44% of those members are taking their income from the European Union gigs and touring, you can see what a kind of potential problem it is for our members in terms of their income stream going forward, if there are, and we know there are, barriers to touring in the European Union. And we're already getting members coming to us saying, you know, they're cancelling stuff because it's just too administrative and financially burdensome for them, which I guess we'll come on to as part of this conversation, really.
Cheers, Stephen. I guess that's a good place to start then. Kind of what have been the big worries that you've seen come to you at the MU, Stephen?
Well, members come to us, you know, and they give us a schedule of gigs that they've been offered in the EU, depending on where they're going. Obviously, the rules, shall we say, are different. So once they look at the gigs that are on offer, and obviously the administrative tasks and the financial burdens they're going to face with work permits, carnets, that's obviously for putting their gear in their vehicles. The CITES stuff, you know, which never existed before for people touring the EU, and although that's not, you know, a financial cost them at the moment, it can be quite difficult to get those certificates, particularly if they need expert advice and stuff like that. So, you know, we've had members basically saying to us, when they look at that, the value of the gigs and the cost and administrative burden, it kind of makes it unviable really for them to accept those gigs. Whilst it might be all right, you know, in the general sense for the bigger acts, certainly for grassroots artists and emerging artists and those freelance musicians that rely on this work and this income across the European Union, it's very, very difficult for them at the moment to see how that might work without some kind of shift, both on the UK government side and within the EU, really, because it's just difficult for them to kind of make any plans, you know, certainly this year. I mean, my own band, for example, we've been offered gigs later in the year, and all I've said to the promoters is come and talk to me in 3 months, really, because it's difficult, you know, particularly if you're young and you're starting out and you're not offered a fee from venues, you're taking a punt on going on a tour, and if you kind of add up all the carnet costs and the work permit stuff, and then, you know, you're on the road costs and accommodation, it's just not viable, and that certainly wasn't the case before. You know, so there are clear barriers to getting out and touring the EU that need to be addressed, really.
Yeah, sure. Katerina, I guess, is it a similar sorts of things from your side over in Germany?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation from the non-UK side is of course different. I mean, the worries are the same, the administrative burdens, and at the moment, of course, still the uncertainty how exactly this is going to look like, because of COVID, there is really no touring going on, so these new rules are not being put to the test really at the moment. So, and of course, from the EU side, for EU artists going into the UK, of course, it's also more administrative burden, but it's only the rules for one country, for one market that have changed. For UK artists, basically, it's the impact is immense, and of course it's a big imbalance. So from this side, of course it is being discussed going to the UK, but I don't think it's such a dominating topic. But from looking at it from a perspective of a European organization, I can only agree with what Stephen has just said. I mean, the big worry is what this means for emerging artists, for young talents who don't have a big team around them that can help them with all of this stuff. So, of course, access to information is a key thing, but these additional costs in all these small venues in Europe that usually book those emerging talents, they're under so much pressure by COVID right now, and putting this on top, of course it's really difficult. And I think it depends on the venues. There are some venues in Europe that a lot of the acts I book are usually from the UK. So and they really depend on also these acts from the UK because they sell tickets and things like that. So it will remains to be seen how this will in reality affect them. So this is a weird situation because we're in this limbo now because we're not really putting anything to the test right now. But of course, these worries with all these different things, they keep just piling up, and it adds on. Oh, it's just a work permit. Oh, you need to apply for a visa, and then you need this and this and this, and it's because it's so many things.
The complexity from my research has been kind of one of the big fears, that there's so many hoops to jump, and every country has its own specific guidelines and regulations, and half of the countries haven't even figured out what that relationship and what those legislations are going to be. So it's kind of it's quite a mad situation, I guess. Phil, I guess as a musician and also as someone who manages musicians, you must be coming up with these discussions quite a lot.
Yeah, so I've actually just come off a call with a booking agent as well for an artist that I represent, and they're saying that for them, and they're used to dealing with the Live Nations, the big booking organisations, there's just so much uncertainty for their artists, at all different levels. But I think it's the up and coming and the regular performing, touring musicians that are going to be the hardest hit, and it's always that way. When there's not lots of money involved, it's going to be difficult. So it's going to be really difficult for the orchestral sector, who are going to be, they've been blindsided by huge costs to do with carnets because of the fact that their trucks are kitted out in particular ways to be able to take equipment across borders. So they have to use their own gear, and that's the price to do that is extortionate. And then if you take the individual musician, I think Spain is the most expensive at the moment. And I think, and you can correct me if I've got the numbers wrong, it's around about £260 to get a visa to perform. And then if you play an instrument where you would need a carnet, you're talking another £360. And that's per musician before you even do a gig in Spain. So if you're trying to break through onto that European circuit, or even if you're a band that has a particular following in Spain, you're talking there of, what is that? It's like nearly £600, maybe just over, per musician before you take a gig. And who's going to take that hit? Because at the moment, the government aren't offering to, and the venues can't afford to. And the musicians really can't afford to. So like Stephen's saying, he's had to say, please get in touch with me when we know what's happening. And I think a combination of some major touring destinations. I play a lot in Spain, and I'm a little bit worried about this summer. I've tentatively booked some things in, but not agreed to them until I see what happens closer to the time. But a combination of these these big kind of touring countries, some of them having unknown quantities, like Italy can be difficult, Spain is the most expensive, and then you've got a lot of other countries, particularly across Eastern Europe, where we just don't know what the rules are. It's becoming an impossible landscape for anybody. If you don't know what's going on, you can't go there because you might not be allowed in. And if you do know what's going on, you might not be able to afford to go there. And then there's also the conundrum about what constitutes freight and what doesn't constitute freight. So, if you've got an instrument that you take on a plane with you, you don't need a carnet. But if it goes in a hold, you might. And there's all these different things. So, for example, I play different saxophones, and I always manage to sneak them onto planes. But if I didn't, I wouldn't have a carnet for it. So do I risk it and not pay £360? Or do I do that as an insurance policy? So there's lots of these areas that, despite some really great work from the Musicians Union and from ISM as well, they have a very comprehensive 30-page document. It's just such an unknown territory that at the moment people are scared to tread into it, you know, until we get more clarity and until we get more support.
That ISM document was a real lifesaver for me. That's where I got most of my information from the talk. It's really useful. So if anyone's looking for guidance, I definitely go that way and look at that document. Just in case anyone's unclear, we should probably define what a carnet is. Stephen, do you want to just quickly do that?
Yeah, so a carnet is a document that you will need that will list all the equipment that you are taking when you go on tour. I mean, generally, if you're taking it in, you know, your own vehicle or a band vehicle, you'll need a carnet covering all that equipment. I mean, clearly it makes economic sense for a band to list all their equipment on a single carnet. There's been some discussion about, you know, the kind of ancillary stuff that you might take, like, and I'm sorry if this is rooted in grassroots rock bands and stuff like that, but things like strings and things and plectrums and what you do, you know, with that, which will, you know, can be added as additional items rather than having to specify each individual one that you then have to come back with, because that would make it almost impossible to list stuff. But essentially, if you're a band or an artist that's going over under your own steam in your own vehicle, you will need a carnet that covers all the equipment that you are taking. And it doesn't end there really, because, you know, on top of the cost of the carnet, you're going to need this kind of guarantee payment scheme that they have, which is based on the percentage of the value of the equipment, to make sure that you're not taking it abroad and then into the EU and then kind of selling it as an export thing. So, for example, if your equipment is worth, say, I don't know, 20 grand that you've got in a van, you'll probably end up having to pay, if you use this guarantee insurance scheme rather than paying the value of the equipment, something like another 180 quid, something like that, on top of the carnet cost. You know, for anybody who's an MU member, we have worked out a couple of schemes, one with Boomerang and another with the London Chamber of Commerce, to get a discount and advice on your carnet. There is some confusion, I think, at the moment about the stuff that Phil mentioned in terms of your what they class as a portable instrument, stuff that you can, you know, just carry on board a plane or something like that, because it was commented, I think, by one of the ministers that if you're just taking a single instrument in your car, you won't need a carnet, which would be great if, you know, you're a solo musician and you're just taking your instrument with you. So we're obviously working with the government to try and find out what they actually mean by that and whether it's true. But ultimately, the truth of all this is, for a carnet, it's going to cost you money. And it's an additional cost that you didn't have before in order to get yourself into the European Union, if you're you know, an artist that's traveling under their own steam, or a band, you know, that's got a load of equipment. And most bands, when they travel, and it'll be the same for orchestras, which is why it's a, you know, a headache for them, will have a significant list of items of equipment that cost quite a lot of money that they take over. You know, and that's essentially the problem, and it's something that didn't exist before. And maybe as part of this, we can have a conversation about the fluidity, really, that musicians operate under in terms of doing different gigs in different countries, and how the new rules kind of impact that. You know, the days, I think, where you got a phone call at 9 o'clock in the morning to cover for somebody who's dropped out at a gig, are probably gone under the current circumstances. You know, and I think any freelance musician will recognize the value of that kind of fluidity. It's almost a bit like industry's last, you know, that kind of just-in-time arrangement that they have for the supply of goods. Well, it's the same for musicians, really. You know, you get caught at 9 o'clock in the morning, next thing you know, you're booking your flights and stuff, and off you pop over to the Netherlands or Germany or France or wherever it is, and some of that's disappearing, although the rules in different countries are different. And I'm just kind of halfway reading through Harriet Harman's 10-point plan going forward about what, you know, she as a parliamentarian and some of her colleagues are looking for in terms of asks of the UK government, which kind of accord with a lot of the stuff that the MU and ISM and UK Music have been saying, really.
Okay, thanks. I guess Katerina, do you know where we're at with legislation in terms of negotiations between EU nations and the UK? Kind of, because the last thing we heard from our side was that the talks have broken down, and then there's been petitions with like the idea of a musician's passport and things like that. Where are we at with that? Where are those discussions kind of? Yeah, where are they at?
I have to say, I'm not really sure. The last one I really followed closely was these bilateral agreements that were needed regarding to social security, because there was a deadline, I think, end of January or in February sometime, and I don't know any updates on that either, because I think it's a lot of it is stuck now on, part of it is bilateral agreements that are necessary to make things easier, because I think that is the thing that makes it so complicated, because it's now 27 different rules that the UK artists have to be aware of, because those are still, I mean, that's kind of the absurd thing, and it's about this whole thing. All these calls in favor of Brexit was, we want to take back control. Well, and now all these other countries, they do control their borders now, and what goes in and goes out. So I mean, somebody took back control, but it was maybe not in the way it was intended. But it's, of course, who are the people who have to suffer from this? And it's not the people who voted for this. But in terms of where we at with the rules, my understanding is that most of it is more now depends on the UK government more to make some of the rules clear. I think, of course, what would be also an important conversation on the EU side or between the EU member states is to find more coherent rules, because there are several countries that are more flexible when it comes to short-term work and things like that, and more coherence on that side, of course, would be really helpful. But I have to say that my impression is that that is not really a priority at the moment for the EU member states, and I think especially at the moment because nothing is happening either. But if there is like a point plan, okay, this would be necessary to at least have more harmonized rules. I think that would help a lot. On the EU side, a topic that's at least within the EU cultural policy sphere, which is quite small, but is discussions about the status of the artists and working conditions of artists. And of course, all these topics will play a big role in that as well. What are the different rules on taxes and social security and all of those things. And I think having that discussion among the EU member states in the end will also be helpful to improve the overall picture and maybe at some point get a better coherence among the EU member states. But I have to be honest, I don't see this as a big topic in the EU member states at the moment. Yeah.
Fair enough. I guess with coronavirus, there's been a delaying of all of these kind of issues being at the forefront, and I guess rightly so. But is once now in the UK, at least, things are starting to open up again potentially, and I know that from like the booking side, August and onwards is looking really busy again for touring artists in the UK. Is there going to be a moment where all of this comes to a head, where there's artists are back on the road and they're doing their UK shows but need to book in Europe, and there's going to be a kind of whole wave of confusion? And is that going to be a big impact, Phil? Is there going to be a moment that kind of this all comes to a head?
I think it's already being felt. I think that even in the UK, if we ignore the European market, even in the UK market, there's a huge backlog, because those who had performances booked in venues and festivals in 2020 had them postponed to 2021. Some of those are now in 2022. And if we think about the rock and roll world or the jazz world or the pop world that works in album cycles, where you might be working with the same material for 2 to 3 years, there's going to be quite a big percentage of the sector that weren't actually planning on being on the road that much in 2020, so didn't mark their stake, in terms of touring, and were planning to maybe tour quite a lot through 2021, but now those dates are going to all the postponements. So my experience is that we're already feeling that backlog, and that, when things do open up over here, it's going to become a further issue. It's already a problem, and it will be compounded by the fact that it's more difficult to tour elsewhere. And for me, there's a few areas that need addressing, which are to do with, and the Musicians Union are talking about a post-Brexit European touring fund, which I'm sure, Stephen, you can tell us more about. But in essence, whilst all of this stuff isn't the most important thing in the world, because lots and lots of people are dying, the least, in my opinion, the government can do is support the artists and the creators in the art sector through this transition, if it's taking a little bit longer to smooth out than was first anticipated. So far they've given just shy of £2 billion to the art sector to essentially mothball the industry and keep the lights on in buildings, but it's not trickled down to performers. They've been struggling. The Musicians Movement Forum every day is full of stories of people who are struggling to pay their rent, who have had to take other work, who can't commit to a gig that comes in because they now need to do the delivery job and can't say yes, because if that gets postponed again, they can't feed their families. And the government now need to step up to the plate, because they've not supported performers directly, many of whom fall through the cracks of the SEISS and the furlough schemes, and they need to put something in place to cover these extra costs, so that once again the artists on the front line of the music sector and across the arts sector aren't being hit hard with extra bills at a time when they've just had the driest 12 months of their career. So I think there's something there that really, really needs to be addressed. And I also think there's something there that someone on the forum brought up, actually. I posted to if people had any questions or wanted to raise certain things, and a lot of people spoke about freight, and a lot of people spoke about the idea of carnets and the various guises that they need to be in, and as Stephen said, with a band, it's best to just probably do one carnet and get all the equipment on there. However, there is also this whole world of freelance performers who fly in and maybe play with a big band, or as a session musician with multiple artists, or with different orchestras, as you're saying, and every single one of those is going to need an individual carnet, and they're going to have to foot that bill themselves right now. So a government support pot is, in my opinion, vital to a transition that doesn't have huge detriment to performing musicians, because there's no way we can compete in a European market if we've got £360 plus an insurance, potentially plus a visa on top of our head before we even get going. I wouldn't even book a UK artist if I was a European promoter, because it just doesn't make business sense. So there's all of that. And then there's also the fact that we haven't had any clarity on education. So what happens to youth orchestras? So if you've got, Rohit, you're sat in Bolton right now, my hometown. What if Bolton Music Service want to take the Bolton Youth Orchestra to Bonn, where Katerina is? The same rules currently seem to apply to some degree, and we've not quite got to that point. And that's a huge part of people's upbringing. It's tied into our education system, along with foreign languages and along with the issues surrounding Erasmus at a later age. There's this whole education thing that needs to be addressed. So that's kind of my two things that I think need addressing. And I think a government-funded pot is essential to make sure that we can compete in what's already a fiercely competitive marketplace. And then something to do with education that I have no idea right now what that is, but hopefully we can start to try and get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, that's totally right to me. I hadn't really thought of, but yeah, I've done a couple of brass band tours when I was younger, and that really was a massive part of my musical upbringing, and those experiences are really enriched kind of my music making and all of those things. So yeah, that's super important. And yeah, I've not heard anyone talk about that before. So yeah, thanks for that. Stephen, I guess, do you want to talk about kind of the MU European touring funds and where those discussions are at?
Well, I mean, this is all very much a proposal at the moment, isn't it? And I think there are a number of issues that need to be factored into this in terms of financial help that will enable grassroots emerging artists and even established companies to be able to afford to get over there. Whether the government take that up and run with it is another issue. I kind of agree with Phil that there's a duality going on here, really, in the sense that, you know, COVID has battered our industry over the last 12 months, and there are many of my members who've kind of had to get another job. You know, I authored a TUC report for the cultural sector before Christmas, you know, and in terms of the freelancer pot and the support that freelancers need now, let alone when we get to a situation where things are kind of getting back to normal, whatever the new normal will be. You know, I spoke in my capacity as chair of the Cultural Industries Leisure Committee in the Midlands with the other unions, Equity and BEC2, and obviously the BEC2 situation for techies who travel with bands and artists is a whole other issue itself, as is the whole cabotage situation, you know, with the vehicles that they take over and how viable that is for UK-based companies. You know, but we worked out a figure just to kind of keep freelancers within the cultural sector surviving really up to this point and some help going forward. You're looking at 42 million quid just for the West Midlands region alone. And those are enormous sums of money. And although the government has made near £2 billion available, as Phil said, most of that money has gone to organisations. You know, myself and my trade union colleagues within the cultural sector joke that the cultural fund that's been made available by the government, the CRF, is, you know, was nicknamed at one point by us the Cultural Redundancy Fund, because as organisations were getting money from government by the Arts Council and stuff like that, they were making hundreds of people redundant, not just musicians, but, you know, front of house staff, technical staff, and people like that. So there's a duality, like I say, really, in terms of support that we need. We need the immediate support now for freelancers, particularly in England, because there's been no pot of money really to support them like there has in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Even those pots of money have not been adequate, in my view. But then there's the extension of that argument for support with, you know, some kind of government fund to enable artists to be able to go and tour the EU so they can cover some of their costs for all these additional burdens that they've got, which makes it unviable, particularly, you know, for young artists, really. You know, when I started out, we were doing reciprocal gig arrangements with bands from Germany and France and the Netherlands and stuff like that. They were getting gigs over there for us, and we were getting gigs for them over here, because we got freedom of movement, and all that just doesn't exist anymore. So, you know, young artists particularly are going to be battered in all of this, you know, so there needs to be direct support to certain areas within the sector, really, and somebody needs to put a figure on that. And I think, you know, the European music and festival circuit is worth over £600 million a year to UK artists. So that's the scale of the problem and the scale of the investment that's probably going to be needed, really, I would suggest.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Can I jump in here? Because one thing, I mean, of course, those connections that exist, because when I hear or read about the impacts of Brexit for UK musicians, I often hear about the comparison. It's now like Australian artists or it's Canadian artists and similar and things like that. But the reality is the UK is not anywhere in Asia or in North America. It is still in Europe, and it's very close. And the connections between the UK and the EU and between the people those still exist. And I mean, I say this because I am representing a European network here. And I think just to give maybe a glimpse into what is possible, because those connections still exist, and there's a lot of willingness to help each other and find information. And although the political will from maybe not the EU and the UK government is not visible at the moment to solve this issue, but exactly those questions of the youth orchestras exchanging, because there are European networks where youth orchestras of the UK are still members together with many from the EU. The same for if you look into education, be it for music education in schools, or if you look at higher music education. And you can break those down to all those levels, be it venues, songwriters, performers, and things like that. And I think that's the important part in those, to keep those connections going and these conversations going. On the EU side, of course, we have on the Move is a big network that provides information about cultural mobility worldwide, not just in Europe. And because we are based in Germany, so I have a bit more insight into that. There's touring artists who are also trying to provide the information that is necessary. I mean, these are small things, but I think it starts with having access to information. And once you have that information, and it's more easy to identify what exactly the issues and the problems are, because I feel that now already in March, we are, of course, already further than we were in January with identifying what exactly the issues will be. And I think it's starting there, and then on both sides in the UK, but also in all the EU member states, to identify these problems. And being from representing also organizations, all three of us here, then taking on the identification of these problems, and then doing the advocacy work from there, because I have to be honest, I don't see really the political will at the moment on either side to solve this. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katrina. I think we'd run over a little bit, so we're going to have to call it time there. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to chat to us. Really, really appreciate all of your time. Just quickly, is there anything that people want to kind of either put forward as like a place to contact you guys, or something where people can kind of take action, or some legislation? Has anyone got any links that they want to share? Katrina, let's go to you first.
Oh, I think if you want to find us, you can find a European Music Council on Twitter, on Facebook. Our website is emc-imc.org, and there you can find all the contact info if you want to get in touch with us, and get updates through our newsletter and things like that. No.
Great, thank you. Phil?
Yeah, for us, our main hive of activity at the moment is over on Facebook. We've got a thing called the Musicians Movement Forum, if you search it, and that's where there's lots of live discussion at all times surrounding the issues. We've also got a website over at musiciansmovement.co.uk.
Thank you very much. And Stephen?
Yeah, we're very easy to find on the internet. You only need to Google Musicians Union and we'll obviously be the first one that comes up. There's loads of information and advice on our website. Clearly, there's a whole lot of lobbying that needs to go on still of government to get, some shift in their position. And I would encourage not just MU members, but, the general public really to continue writing and contacting their local MP to put them under pressure. I met with Nigel Huddleston, who's a junior minister in the government last year, and he said to me that, you guys need to keep up the pressure, because ultimately it's the pressure that will force government to do something. So that's my message. Really, we just need to keep up the pressure on government to kind of open not just bilateral talks, but talks with the European Union on getting the visa and the carne stuff all sorted out. So there's a European-wide agreement, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Apologies for my horror movie style lighting as we've gone through. I thought it would be a bit brighter, but lost the sunlight. But we've got another one of these talks in 2 weeks, and that'll be focusing on artist residency. So same time in 2 weeks. So hopefully see some of you there. Cheers, and yeah, see you next time.